What's up, everybody? Welcome to Philosophy, a production of the Counseling Center in Portsmouth, Ohio. I am Senior Director and Background Dancer, Max Lyles, here today with two very good friends, the Executive Producer and Director of soon to be seen in a theater near you, Smalltown Strong Documentary. Boys, what's up?
Hey.
Glad you guys are here. Glad you guys are here, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Nowhere else would rather be.
I guarantee it. Dale King, I'd like to start off by saying you are our first and only second-time guest at this point. I know that that's something that you will herald for a long time
Does that
coming,
mean
man.
I get to keep this mug?
You got to talk to the Sadie about that. I don't know if she's going to cut loose of a second one for you, but welcome back to the show again, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, buddy.
Proud owner of PSKC CrossFit and partner of the Counseling Center and the Health and Wellness Project. Anything else I left out in your own bio there?
No, man. That's good.
Why don't you introduce our second guest here today, man? You go back pretty far with Chase.
My first mug, man.
Yeah, and Chase is on his first mug, so take it easy on him.
We'll see if he gets invited back.
Right, no doubt. No
Rare
doubt.
air up here.
Yeah.
Hailing from the plains of West Texas, all the way a proud naval public school grad.
Oh, man.
That was a long time. The Naval Academy.
Oh, my God. That's remarkable. I didn't know
It was
that.
a long time ago.
He's a lover of the Hawaiian ladies.
Can I do my own bio? Because
I thought he was doing a great job.
He cut his teeth in the show business industry out in L.A. for a while, and the good Lord pulled him back to the hills of Appalachia,
Yes, sir.
where his better half is proudly from, the West Side.
OG West Sider.
I married Miley Gherkin, now Millsap, on the west side. So it's good to be back.
Why heavens, yes, man.
Yeah.
So what all Dale leave out? Chase, welcome to the show.
I mean, there were a few years
what all
in there. No, but I think you hit the wave tops. Was in the military for a little over 15 years, and then went into filmmaking. Have been doing that for the last decade.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, fell in love with a girl from the west side, and here I am. So
Yeah.
excited to be here and chat.
Absolutely, man. We're glad to have you, and glad to have you back again, man. Talk about some of the previous film stuff you've done before we dive into some of the new things or whatever. Talk about some of the other stuff projects you put out.
Yeah, it's kind of been all over. I mean, my big thing is I love to tell true stories, and I love to tell stories about worlds that I've never been into before. So I did a refugee documentary for National Geographic with my brother, who I'm sure we'll talk about, Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer Van Gogh.
Spencer Van Gogh.
My dude. Yes.
And then have done, did a show about boot camp, did a show on CBS called United States of Al.
It's like the number one show there for
It was,
Rip,
yeah,
right?
we were comedy. We were on Thursday nights, and we did 2 seasons of that.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I had Dean Norris from Breaking Bad on there,
Yeah.
so we had a lot of fun with it. And then, I've done just little odd things from, worked on NCIS for a bit, and have worked on a show called Disjointed, and currently been working on a documentary here in Portsmouth called Smalltown Strong. So that's my current project.
Yeah, cool, man. Any TV experience that you want to add in or leave out? I know you mean the guy from Shark Tank? You know what I mean?
Well,
Chase isn't the only guy that's dabbled in TV. What did he say?
actually,
cut your
that's
teeth?
a good.
Cut my teeth, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the first time we met in real life was we went to out to Hollywood to film Shark Tank.
Yep.
And our mutual friend Sarah Mock was like, "Hey, Miley's married to this guy. He claims he was Marine, but he's also claiming he's Army Special Forces."
Yeah,
and I was
he
like,
also said he graduated from the
Can't
Naval
happen.
Academy.
I was
Never
throwing the
happened.
Is this
flag.
David
I'm like,
Galkins?
I was
Yeah.
like, she's married to Mr. Stolen Valor, apparently.
Yeah.
So we met, and I was like, "Oh, he actually was a Marine, left the Marine Corps, went to the Army Q course, became a Special Forces captain." I was like, "Oh, it's like one of."
I had to show him the Green Beret and everything.
That's remarkable.
Until he believed me.
Till he believes me.
Yeah.
He's a skeptic. Dale King's a skeptic.
I mean,
you know what I mean? From a
I'm
show
okay with
state,
that.
if you
I'm
will.
okay with
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
And he helped us rehearse the night before we were hanging out, and introduced us some fabulous California tacos out there. And ever since, we it's like Butch and Sundance, man.
Yeah. Inseparable. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
Batman and Robin, if you will, man. If you will. You were talking about telling stories of worlds you've never been in before, right? You're from the Portsmouth area. You've recounted some of your, coming back pretty widely of when you came back here post getting out of the military and kind of how screwed up everything was, right? With the way that the town was when you came back versus how it was when you left it. You kind of from the outside looking in, talk about some of those initial reactions of coming into Portsmouth and your first time here, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably, I guess, around 2010 or 11.
Okay.
And so we were coming from LA to just come visit family. I mean, that was the plan.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife took me down probably close to 2nd Street or Front Street, and I remember thinking, wow, this looks like Iraq. And I mean, it in a lot of ways it did.
Yeah.
The streets, looked a little beat up, and I remember kind of looking around and being like, are we safe here? And, for me, it was kind of an eye opener. I just didn't understand, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because I just, heard from her family, what Portsmouth kind of was when they were growing up.
Sure.
And so coming back, that was a shock for me. And then, over the years, we kept coming back before we eventually moved back. I mean, you could just see it. You could see that the town was changing. And then, as before I even met Dale, I mean, I would ask people, like, what's going on there? And they would say the gym. So that was sort of like my first eye opener to something was happening here. I didn't really know what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, what was actually happening behind the scenes, but I just knew something was happening.
Interesting timeline, just like popping in my head. So 2010-11, in that calendar year, that was the year that there were 10 million Oxycontin tablets dispersed in the 45662 zip code, right? So that breaks down to be like 120 some odd tablets for every man, woman, and child in the county, right? So people here are really in pain. You know what I mean? That's one of the, so like that timeline. And then talking about the change on the other side of that, you have the Affordable Health Care Act that happens, and then Medicaid expansion, and you really see that kind of take off in like 2012, right? So then that was one of those other things that was kind of lining up around that same sort of time frame, just for context of time frames we're talking about or whatever. But yeah, are we safe here? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, we survived, but it was. I didn't know if I needed body armor or not.
And then have come back and now are landed hippies, proper homeowners here in the area, correct?
I am
growing
I'm a
roots.
Scioto County taxpayer.
Why heavens, yes.
I live in the city of Portsmouth, and I've even been to the Fishbowl. So I feel
best wings in town. Man.
He just has a name drop.
Yeah, name drop. Yeah. Fishbowl. We're looking for ad sponsorships.
We're going to see Fishbowl tick across the bottom.
We're going to be next door neighbors, so hit us up.
So,
Wednesday wing night.
Yes, sir.
They are pretty good wings.
No doubt. How's that line up with you coming back and some of the stuff that he's talking about?
Yeah, man, it's dead on. And I think, too, at that point in your life, when you're fresh out of the military, everything you view the lens through is like a threat.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
And it's interesting to hear somebody else from a different point of view talk about that, and it's like, oh man, yeah, I was looking at everything through the lens of this is a threat. And that's kind of how I felt. I mean, we've discussed it before, but it's really hard to articulate, to put into words the vibe at that time.
Yeah.
And I had a different point of view because I was gone for almost a decade, and when I left in the late '90s. So it was like at that exact time when it was the wave was coming, and then I just left right before it crashed. Yeah. And then to come back and see the devastation from that wave was like, what?
Yeah, like what happened?
Here. So, yeah, man, it was. I remember the first time my car ever got broken into was when I came back home, and the old Nissan Xterra got broken into. Just something was in there that somebody needed.
They took your Nickelback CD.
Took my entire catalog of Creed and Nickelback CDs.
Man, that's a tragedy.
It's devastating.
Yeah. If anybody sees those out there, I'd like to get those back.
Yep. Yeah. They say they got a DK on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, R.I.P. The Xterra and the CDs, dude. Gosh. Maybe we could drop some Nickelback music in.
Please.
Or some Creed.
Please.
Arms wide open, maybe?
Wait, what I've learned is we can do that in post.
Yep, in post.
Can do that in post.
With on. Yes, man. Okay, so then since you guys have kind of seen that sort of wave change, and the Smalltown Strong documentary revolves around the recovery community and the stuff that's happening here and the ways that people's lives are changing in regards from sort of coming out of that like substance use disorder, drug-centered lifestyle, right? And sort of the reintegration back into the community and larger society and that kind of things. What's it been like in Portsmouth since you've gotten to actually spend time with the recovery community? Like, what's that experience been like?
You want to go first?
In a lot of ways, Chase and I had similar backgrounds. In a way, like a mission set is foreign internal defense, and that's just a small team of folks who go to a foreign country and link up with that nation's army and help build, train, and develop that nation's force, right? And it is almost identical to that, right? So I knew the people; these were my people. I grew up here, but I had no concept of their history and culture in the drug community, right? So it was identical. It was a very similar experience to like learning their history, man. And that was the biggest thing for me is, okay, well, clearly there's a problem here, and clearly it's the addict's fault. I mean, it just makes the most sense. Like they're the ones voluntarily choosing to do drugs. So what's the issue here? But until you sit down, break bread, have coffee, and learn that, hey, man, this is not the route I wanted to choose in life.
Yeah.
And then the Smalltown Strong is a kind of a collection of a few stories. But to hear those stories on a one-on-one basis from somebody you know, love, and trust, it's like, whoa, you've been through the ringer in your life.
Yeah.
And, talking to people, strangely, you develop compassion and empathy.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Instead of being surrounded in your bubble of technology in your echo chamber where everybody's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Go talk to somebody, you learn their history, their background,
right,
and their struggles, and you can relate to that. So it was, whether dealing with a foreign, like my line at the time was like, listen, I used to teach people how to do kettlebell swings, which was like a crazy thing in 2009, 2010.
Right. Yeah, trendy and edgy and fun.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, listen, if I can,
and Nickelback.
If I can teach the Iraqi army how to do stuff, I can teach you how to do a kettlebell swing.
Right. Yeah.
So that was like, it's the same experience. Like just, if I can develop relationships with folks in Iraq who are in the worst position of warfare,
right.
It was very similar to deal with folks who had no background.
And I think that's too is like an important thing of like, that sort of like paradigm shift that happens, right? The way that I see the world is based on the way that I experience the world, right? The whole feedback loop of my previous experiences have set up the way that I'm going to see and interpret the world around me and how it happens. And it's not until that stuff gets challenged, right, that I do that. And that's like on this project, and then in other things I've always said, like, if you're curious about us, like, come spend time with us.
Yeah.
Come spend time with us. The Hawk's a great place to do that, right? Come get a workout in or whatever. If you want to sit down, like, talk about addiction treatment, recovery, and that kind of stuff, we've got the loved ones group that runs, but like, come spend time with us and we'll talk about what's going on if you've got questions or whatever.
Yep.
Because it's hard, I think, to, it's like, once you like meet the people, because that's who they are. They're just people.
Yeah.
They're just people with stories and pasts and that kind of thing. But then the recovery process that happens, right, is like the person that's sitting in front of you that you might meet, you can't ever imagine them being the person that they're telling you stories about.
Yeah. They're not an addict.
Right.
They're Ricky.
Right.
They're Sarah.
Right.
They're Max.
Right.
They're Allie.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing is you got to put an action and telling stories. Since I'm so well versed in the entertainment industry now,
it's catching up.
That's what that does.
Yeah.
You see one person struggle and you follow their journey, and now you're no longer associating this terrible negative stigma attached to a group of people.
Right.
It's like, oh, I now know what Sarah went through.
Right.
And why people like Sarah struggle with it.
Sure.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you used a word that was really important. If I put my filmmaker hat on for a second,
This dude's got so many hats, by the way, to everybody watching.
We're getting a hat sponsor.
but
now?
there's a
Lids, if you're watching this.
the most important word was trust. I mean, I knew
Yep.
from the beginning that if we wanted to tell this story the right way, we really had to build trust. And Dale and his team at the gym had led the charge on that. Right. Like that was a big component of it. We started rolling cameras in 2018. I mean, we've got 4 years of footage that we've been taking slowly over time, and asking people, some pretty hard questions.
Sure.
And for me, it was, number one at the end of the day was, people going through recovery and just in general, people with their jobs, you put a camera in their face and it makes your life not easy.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that we were, one, being very respectful of people's recovery as we were going through that, because that's the most important part. But two, that we were capturing the story in the right way.
Right.
And so that meant it was a lot of showing up early in the morning. It was a lot of showing up late at night. It was a lot of, I've driven to Adams County now a couple of times to get that, that experience. We've been down in the East End. We've been all over. We've been to Kentucky and back. So we wanted to just make sure that we embedded and took the time to get the stories right. And I think what you find in the doc, and, I would love to just be able to, there's so many stories of people that have gone through so much and then recovered on it. And to your point, I can see it in the footage now where you can see somebody when they're very early in the hawk to where they're at now. I mean, it's just a night and day difference.
Yeah.
So, there's so many of those we wanted to tell, but from the documentary perspective, we really tried to focus on a few that have really used fitness as to power their recovery. It's not the only piece. It's a big component of it, but not the only one. And just show how powerful that is in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So then what is your kind of takeaway of what's it been like from going into a community that you know nothing about, again, which you've admittedly you like to do?
Yeah.
What's some of the stuff that you've learned with the recovery population or Portsmouth, the area generally, versus some of the maybe expectations or preconceived notions you had or whatever?
I know what a bando is now.
Bando. I mean, we can drop that in too. You know what I mean?
There's a whole list.
Maybe it's a musical episode.
I think the big one for me was I didn't fully understand how bad the problem was.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of documentaries out there, but I didn't fully appreciate how the path through, whatever opioid it is, whether it's meth, heroin, whatever your substance of choice is, how one, easily available was at certain points, and then two, just how devastating that could be. So that was a big eye opener for me, and it also opened my mind about the science behind it, which we should talk about how we want to show different things.
Sure.
And I think what it came back for me was, and this is just me personally, is just I speak Arabic, I speak Spanish, I speak a couple. I think I'm logo Arabia, Shwaya, but.
What can't this guy do? You know what I mean?
Medically qualified, for combat life-saving,
bona fide,
jump status. I've done these skills where the Army taught me a lot about how to do things and take things and be on my own. But the one thing I didn't know, and I didn't know how to help people in recovery.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand at all how to help or support somebody, and I just felt completely useless.
Yep.
And so that's what a big part of picking up that camera was, is to say, well, I want to learn as much as I can, because there's somebody out there that's going to watch this that probably feels useless too and wants to help but doesn't know how. And I think that was a big part of the storytelling we wanted to get into there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's remarkable that you would say, because, you strike me as the person that's well, Chase will know what to do. Call Chase. Yeah. So it's to openly admit, in dealing with the substance use disorder population that's in early recovery, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do.
Had to learn how to be, helpful, what to say, those sort of things. And then, when you get into whether it's a relapse or you get into these things of, just how do you talk to somebody about that?
Yeah.
How do you offer your support? What do you say when you're talking to somebody that's either in recovery or one of their family members? I mean, I wanted to get as far down the rabbit hole as I could, because, there may not be a camera one day and, have the opportunity to help. And I wanted to learn all that. And I also wanted to learn, like I said, the science behind it.
Yeah. So what is some of the stuff that you've learned about the science behind it? Because you've got a total stud lined up for the doc that's going to go into some of that.
Dr. McDreamy.
Yeah, Dr. Dream
so
McDreamy.
Yeah.
He's probably out getting his morning sun right now with his shirt off. You know what I mean? Just out walking around the clinic, man.
You got to get Dr. Tom on here at some
Oh,
point.
absolutely. Yeah.
He's amazing.
I have a plan for Dr. Tom's life. You know what I mean? If we get him on here, we get him on Not Your Average IV user. You know what I mean? To talk about some of the stuff.
Well, what we did was, you were on the documentary too, so you're a subject matter expert. Spoiler alert. Right there. But what we
you
really
never would have
to
guessed.
we tried to find people that had, one, a career and background, not only in, whether it's emergency medicine or the neuroscience behind it, or, chemical dependency, counseling, case management, that sort of stuff. We wanted the actual experts in that. And then we also wanted to get through people that had gone through overdoses, had gone through and had the real world experience. So, from my perspective, it was just as important to give time to people that have lived the worst moments of their life to those that have been through massive amounts of training, right? Because you can learn from both. So that's what we really tried to spend that time on. And in a lot of ways, we found that, that high, that hit that you get when you first start using, and then, over time kind of gets less and less and less, is very similar from the brain structure through that dopamine receptors. It's almost the same as when you start using as when you start doing a CrossFit or fitness activity. It's almost the exact same. And that got me thinking, well, if the brain doesn't know the difference between the two, then what are all the other pieces here that can help me, as I start to come through recovery? And then you find, when you start doing fitness, especially community fitness, right? It doesn't have to be CrossFit. CrossFit's pretty 20 minutes and you're good. It's an easy check-in. But a group run, yoga, all the things you can find at the Hawk, right? All of those things.
Done together.
Done together, right? You do it with other people. Now the brain starts realizing, oh, I have a community around me, and you get another hit, which is that oxytocin, which is just like being at Thanksgiving dinner, right? So now your brain's getting that double whammy. And I didn't fully understand that until we were able to show it through some brain scans, and then we've got some graphics to pull those two together, so you can actually see, and you'll see it in people's faces, what happens when they work out. They work out together, and what that brain is doing. It's really kind of a cool thing, and I didn't know that. I didn't know how the brain worked on this stuff, and you start to get a sense of, well, if this is working for that person, maybe it can work for me. And I think that's one of the areas I'm really excited to explore in the doc.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.